Of his mission, Elder John H. Groberg said, "Let me state clearly that I do not feel my mission was any more special or purposeful than any other person's mission. Everyone's mission and marriage is special to them because it is theirs. And if they put their whole heart and soul into it, God will make it eternally meaningful." End quote. However, John Groberg's mission has become meaningful to many people around the world, specifically the Tongan people he came to love, his future wife, and not to mention the hundreds of thousands of people who have watched Other Side of Heaven 1 and 2. Elder John H. Groberg is an Emeritus General Authority 70. He and his wife, Jean Groberg, are the parents of 11 children. Just 10 years after returning home from his young mission to Tonga, the Grobergs, along with their 5 young daughters, returned to Tonga as mission president and wife. This is All In, an LDS Living podcast where we ask the question, what does it really mean to be all in the gospel of Jesus Christ? I'm Morgan Jones, and I'm honored to have John and Jean Groberg here with me today. Elder and Sister Groberg, welcome.
Thank you.
We are so excited to have you. First of all, let's talk about these movies. These movies, Other Side of Heaven 1 and 2, are based on your lives, which is pretty surreal. Is it weird to have your life in a movie?
It is, definitely.
I can only imagine. But did you ever anticipate that so many people would respond to the movie in the way they did, or that it would have the success that it's had?
Oh, never even thought of it. Never even thought we would have a movie in the first place. So, no, the answer is it wasn't anything we planned or hoped for. It's just we're grateful that it's worked out the way it has.
Absolutely. Well, we are so grateful that you shared these stories. And Elder Groberg, you wrote these stories out of out of obedience to Elder President Thomas S. Monson. What kind of gratitude do you feel toward him in retrospect that he encouraged you to write these things down?
Well, I feel deep gratitude for him because, as he said, John, if you don't write them down, that'll be a chapter of church history that'll just be lost because we don't do things like that anymore. And you've just got to do it. And I had never written a book before. I had no idea about how to go about it, but with his encouragement, I did. And I know that there was an extra spirit to help me do it because it was responding to a request from one of the members of the 12, and you're always blessed if you obey them.
Yeah. And President Monson, you had gotten to know him very well because he was assigned to the South Pacific. Is that right?
That's right. When we were called as mission president in 1966, he had been assigned to the South Pacific in 1965, just the year before. So he was our first contact, and we spent a lot of time with him, not just hours, but days and even weeks. Became very well acquainted. He was so supportive and helpful in a lot of challenges that we had at the time, but it was a marvelous experience. And then, of course, being a general authority, I worked with him on many occasions too.
Yeah. So neat. So neat to have had that opportunity to get to know a prophet on that level. I want to start, if it's okay, with kind of the first movie, your time as a young missionary. And Jean, at this point, you were waiting for a missionary, which is something that resonates with a lot of women in our culture, I think. But when you think back on your time as a young missionary, Elder Groberg, what are the most vivid memories of that time in your life?
Well, I think the fact that it actually happened, as I look back, sometimes I say, wow, did
that really happen to me?
Yeah. And yet at the time it wasn't all that scary. I mean, it was scary, but that was just the way it was. I didn't really think it was that different because I didn't really have anything else to compare it with. But I grew up in a farming community in Idaho, and we were just taught that you do what you commit to do, and you don't ever say that's too much or I'm not going to do it. That, if they assigned you 2 rows of sugar beets to hoe, you did them, even though you were tired after the first half of the first row. You just did it. It was during the Depression and the Second World War. And I think that was sort of my attitude. I mean, we had a lot of horrendous experiences as you look back. But at the time, even though they were scary, well, that's just what you do. You're here, you agreed to come, and you just do it. And so I don't know if that answers your question or not, but that was kind of my feeling.
Yeah. Gene, we see little bits of your life in that first movie. What didn't we see about what was going on in your life while your husband was on his mission, your boyfriend at the time? And what were you learning while he was away?
Well, you mentioned earlier that I was waiting. I was writing to a missionary. We had not made any commitments at all, just that we were good friends and both felt really good about him going on a mission. And our only agreement was that we would write to one another and wait and see what the Lord had in mind for our lives. So I continued my studies at BYU my junior and senior year and had a wonderful time dating others and had wonderful roommates who were a great influence on my life, and graduated with a degree in elementary education and took my first job in Anaheim, California as a first and second grade school teacher. And busy there with lots of friends. And the letters that came from the Pacific were wonderful and exciting. And I grew to gain a much increased appreciation of the kind of person that Elder Groberg was becoming. And through the time, decided that I really did want to at least be around when he got home to see what would happen.
Yeah, it's so neat. So how long after when you got home, Elder Groberg, how long was it until the two of you got married?
2.5 months.
A couple of months. I got home the last of June or 1st of July, and we got married in September.
It's a good decision.
Yeah.
Good decision.
So one thing that I love looking back on that first movie, which was 18 years ago, which is so crazy. I've never felt older, is looking back and seeing Christopher Gorham and Anne Hathaway. Not many people, Gene, can say that an Oscar winner portrayed them in a film. So that's pretty cool. But looking back on that, and they were two people that were, up and coming actors, and they were not members of our faith. And they, to me, did such a good job of portraying, especially Christopher Gorham, that experience of being a missionary. How do you think he was able to kind of capture that missionary spirit, even as somebody that's not a member of our faith?
Well, he's, of course, a good actor, for one, but he's a good man, too. He's kind of contra what a lot of Hollywood people do. That is, he's married and stayed married to the same woman. They have 3 children. They're Catholic. They're very good people, very devoted. His oldest child is autistic, quite autistic, and sometimes that drives couples apart, but in their case, it's pulled them closer together. And he did go out with the missionaries in Tonga for a full day.
Yes, he had that actual experience of walking and going with the missionaries.
Teaching lessons and so forth. But I think we have to acknowledge that there are a lot of good people that aren't members of the church, and they have good, high moral standards. And I think he just, I don't know. One thing, he fell in love with Feki, just the part as he read the book and read the script. And when you asked about my first mission, one of the things that really helped me a lot was Feki himself. I just felt like there was someone I could rely on and help. And I got the idea that Chris got that feeling, Chris Gorham, that, here's here's a really good man. And so that's about all I can say. I don't know if Jean might say something on.
Well, they called us before starting to do the shooting and asked questions, and both Annie called me and Chris talked to John. And, they were both sincere in wanting to get the feel and the spirit of the people they were portraying. So
that's so neat. And you were able to meet them on the set. Have you kept in touch? I think you have kept in touch with Christopher Gorham.
Well, yes, he's went on our family Christmas letter list, and he has said that he enjoys getting those letters. So I was happy to hear that.
So neat.
We haven't, of course, Annie has sort of taken off on a different tack. But when I first met Annie, this was the first full movie she did. She did this actually before she did The Princess Diaries.
Yeah.
But they waited till after The Princess Diaries
came out.
But when I first met Annie, I don't know what she expected, but as I talked to her, I said, "So you're the lucky girl that gets to play the part of my wife," and she kind of was taken back, rather than saying, "Oh, we're lucky to have you." I said, "You're the lucky girl that gets to play my wife," and her first comment, she just looked for a while and then says, "You really love her, don't you?" And I said, "I sure do." And I think she felt that and kind of tried to convey that.
Yeah. Well, they both did an incredible job. You mentioned Feki. For those listening, Elder Groberg, who are not as familiar with your story, who is Feki?
Feki was my first companion. When I arrived in Tonga, it took me 3 months to get there. That's one of the reasons it was a 3-year mission, is because they didn't start counting the time until you actually arrived in the mission field. Now they count it when you go in the MTC, but we didn't have an MTC in those days. But the mission president assigned me to go to the farthest island away from church headquarters there in Tonga, Untitled Chapter, which is closer to Samoa than it is to Tonga, but it's part of Tonga. And he assigned me to go with Feki Bo'uha as my first companion. Feki was not a full-time missionary. He was a building missionary. He didn't even hold the Melchizedek priesthood. He was a priest. In those days, they didn't ordain people to the Melchizedek priesthood until they were married.
In Tonga.
In Tonga, yeah. But he turned out to be just a perfect companion. He didn't know the discussions because he hadn't been a missionary, but he knew the gospel, and he had a strong testimony. But the main thing is President Coombs, who was my mission president, assigned him, and I said, "You protect Elder Groberg. Don't let anything happen to him," And boy, he took that to heart, and I felt it. There were a lot of challenges, but Feki he was my first companion. I hear of people that get tired of being in an area for several months and the same companion. Well, I was on Untitled Chapter for 13 months with Feki, the same companion, for 13 months. So I don't have much sympathy for people that complain. It was wonderful. Yeah. He was wonderful and very, very strong in the church and in his testimony and in his ability to protect me and to help me.
Yeah. And I grew to love him just through the letters, through comments that John would write in the letters about the things that Feki would do and say. And
unfortunately, he married, and they had a couple of children, and then he got cancer and died in his 40s. So I didn't really have a long association with him afterwards.
Yeah. Were you able to meet him, Jean, when you all went back to Tonga? Okay.
He was at that time, he married a girl from Niue Island, which was part of our mission, but not part of Tonga. And we went there and had the opportunity to meet Feki and Foley, his wife, and little Joe, their little boy at the time.
That was one thing I wanted to kind of ask about. You heard in letters all about Tonga. It was this place that I'm sure you couldn't even totally wrap your head around. And then Elder Groberg comes back. This second movie focuses on your time as a mission president in Tonga. Jean, for you, when you first got there and were able to meet the people and see the place that you had only heard about in letters, what was that like for you?
Well, I was pretty excited as well as a little scared. Of course, worried about being able to communicate, not knowing the language very well. But I was thrilled because I had gained a great love for the Polynesians and specifically the Tongan people through the years of writing Dear John letters. Had an opportunity to meet just a few of them when I was at BYU, a few Polynesians. And actually I joined what was then called the Kiora Club and participated in the Polynesian type activities my last 2 years at BYU. So it was wonderful to be there and see for myself. I was thrilled for the opportunity and gained my own love and appreciation for the goodness of the people, their helpfulness, and their great faith.
So neat. Elder Groberg, what did it mean for you to be able to go back to Tonga this time with your family and be able to share that experience with people that you love?
It was wonderful. I just enjoyed every moment of it, even though, again, we had huge challenges health-wise and just physical, to get to the islands. There were no airplanes and cars were very few and far between, but the sailing and we did have motor boats this time rather than sailboats when I was there the first time as a young missionary. But still, the seas are rough and there were lots of big challenges. But again, the faith and the courage of the people and the support of President Monson, Elder Monson at the time, and Elder Hunter took over the last year or so of our time there. But I just felt good, solid support from the people and from the leaders of the church and from the members, and we had good missionaries. It was, there were a lot of challenges, but you can handle challenges if you feel like you have good support.
Absolutely. I want to talk a little bit about some of those challenges. One challenge that you faced while you were there, your baby got sick. And you, Jean, had to come back to the United States with the baby, leaving your other children. How many other children? Five other
daughters,
children.
Yeah.
With Elder Groberg and President Groberg then in Tonga. What was that like? I imagine a full range of emotions.
Well, that's so true. It was a full range of emotions. Gratitude being one of them, because we were grateful that we were now going to be able to get the help that was needed to find out what was wrong with the baby, why he was so sick. And that takes priority. You've got to do what has to be done. And gratefully, I didn't have to face the trip all alone. John's mother, my mother-in-law, had come down to be there when the baby was born. She's a great woman and wanted to always be there when her grandchildren was born to be helpful. And so she came all the way to Tonga. And as the baby got sick, she delayed her trip back and kept back, and then he'd get well and she'd almost be ready to go, and then he'd get sick again. And so she was there and made the trip home with me. That isn't shown in the movie, but that was a great blessing to have her by my side.
Yeah.
Knowing the good Tongan people would be helping with the girls there, and knowing I had the support of my parents and John's parents at home. It all works out. As he said, you just kind of take what's in front of you and move forward, do what has to be done at the time.
Yeah. Elder Groberg, did you feel quite a bit of responsibility having 5 girls?
I'll have to tell you a funny story. After Jean had been gone for a couple of months, of course, I was anxious to have her go because that was the opportunity for our son to live. It turned out that he had a congenital kidney problem that they would have never been able to detect in Tonga, but with sophisticated equipment here, and they were able to operate and get him stable, but they had to keep him here because he was not in a good position. They couldn't operate until he was about 2 years old to make the final corrections, which has allowed him to live. So when Gene had been here a couple of months and that finally all the tests were in and said, no, he can't come back, but he can stay here. And so I called Gene once I think it was from Fiji, and I said, we have about 10,000 members here, and I can handle them because we have 10 districts or 11 districts at the time. We had no stakes at the time. And we've got good district presidents, and we have pretty close to 400 missionaries at the time, counting couples, local couples. I can handle them because we've got good zone leaders and lots of help there. They're good people. But I just can't handle these 5 little girls on my own. I need your help. And
they've got you surrounded.
And so the timing worked out really good. By then, it was obvious he was going to be able to live at least until the next big operation, which they couldn't do for a couple of years. So we had just 1 year left. So Gene came back, and we didn't see him again until I didn't see him for about a year and a half. Gene saw him about a little over a year later.
Wow. It's amazing. It's amazing to me the sacrifices that people make to share the gospel, and certainly yours is no exception. As you both were able to spend time as missionaries with the people of Tonga, and then in years since, I attended a temple sealing for my old roommate about 2 years ago. And it would have been 2 years ago this time of year. And Elder Groberg, you performed the sealing, and her husband now is from Tonga. And it was such a neat thing to watch the love and admiration that the Tongan people have for both of you. And I think that that's such a testament to the love that they've felt from you. What do the people of Tonga mean to you, and what do you love most about them?
Well, they're very dear to my heart. Most of the ones that we personally interacted with while we were there, many of them have passed on now, and we're meeting not only their children, but their grandchildren, and going to many of their weddings and things like that. So they're like family to us. We really love them, love their faith, their goodness, their unselfishness. They're just ready to help at any moment that they feel a need.
Yeah.
And anyone, they're not just with us, they're helpful to everyone.
Right.
I think that just their humility and their faithfulness, their willingness to help, and they're just being who they are. There's no pretenses. That's one thing that I really love about the Polynesian people generally, and about the Tongans specifically. Of course, there are individual exceptions, but as a group, they really don't put on any airs that that's who I am and this is what I'm doing, and they have what they call, every once in a while, they have what they call loto puna, which means they just jump out of themselves almost with excitement and so forth. And sometimes that's for good, sometimes it's for not so good, but they're just very genuine and very honest and very helpful and loving and kind. And again, just this is who I am.
Yeah. Do you think, Elder Groberg, looking back, that there's a reason that you fit in so well in Tonga?
That's hard to answer, but I think one of the reasons is that they have a great deal of desire to help other people. And I was raised with that same feeling that you're here on earth to help other people. You're not here to get things for yourself. You're here to really help other people. That was just the way I was raised, not only in the church, but by my parents. And I think I related to that because they felt the same way, that they were here mostly to help other people, and they were very unselfish and very helpful. And so I think there was a kind of a relationship there that started right from the beginning.
Yeah, I ask that because I remember at the beginning of my mission, I served a Spanish-speaking mission. And at the beginning of my mission, my companion made a comment, my trainer, she made a comment and she just said, kind of almost in passing, she said, you'll realize why you were called to be a Spanish-speaking missionary. And at the time, I was struggling with the language, and I struggled my whole mission with the language. So that was not just in the beginning, but I kind of spent the rest of my mission looking for those reasons that I was called Spanish speaking. And I could see things about myself that made it so that I connected with the Hispanic people. And it was just something that I was grateful that she pointed out that I then looked for, because it made a huge difference for me.
That's lovely. Mm-hmm.
Another thing that I love that in the movie is portrayed is this kind of the way that the entire Tongan community, regardless of their faith, kind of rallied around your family during this time. And I think that that's such a beautiful example. I think sometimes we do ourselves such a disservice when we place up walls based on faith or whatever, these divisions that keep us from serving. And I think that that example in the film of the Tongan people's love and rallying around your family is so beautiful. What can we learn about that experience? What can we learn from that experience about serving people and loving people?
Well, that's what Christ asked us to do, to love one another as his example of loving us. And I think the Polynesian people, it's just part of their DNA almost. It's just their culture, their putting that into practice. It's a great heritage, and I think that we all need to try that and need to put it into practice.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that it's more than just our family. It's kind of their way of life. That is, if there's a Wesleyan church being built, the Mormon or the members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and the Catholics and others help. If we're building a church, they'll help. If someone's sick here, they'll help. There is tension between religions, as there is
anywhere.
Most places, but that is superseded by their desire to be helpful. And so I think there is a great, great lesson for us all to learn. And I think President Nelson and the church leaders today are saying that same thing. Hey, if people need help, it doesn't matter what religion they are, we're going to help them.
Right.
And I think that's really part of the Tongan culture, part of the Polynesian culture, that we're here to help. And I think it goes back to what I said earlier, that I was just raised that way, that's why we're here on earth. It's to help. And I really loved the way President Monson, of course, was so willing to just help whenever we had challenges and like they had hurricanes or different things. Boy, he was right on. What can we do to help, as the church? And our chapels are so often used as when there's hurricanes or earthquakes or things of that nature. A lot of the other structures are blown away, but the church is there. And he says, don't even hesitate. Just invite them to come in. And so I think that's my feeling anyway.
Yeah.
That's one lesson we can all learn, not only from the Tongan people, but from our own leaders and from the Savior himself, as Jesus said.
Yeah. I think that it's so interesting to look at the church today and how many Polynesian members there are. We had the chance early this year to travel to Philadelphia, and we were able to meet with Vaisa Kahema, and he told us all about his experience of his family going to the temple and the sacrifices that they made. And when you hear him tell his story, it's like impossible not to feel emotional, because you just feel the fire of their faith, quite literally. What do the Polynesian people mean to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints?
I think they're a great example, as has been expressed, that we need to use their open, loving ways to help one another and to reach out. And you can go almost any place in the world now and find a Tongan. We had one of our grandsons served in the French Leon mission, and in his first area there was a Tongan family living there. He was there as a rugby coach. And they'd gone inactive in the church. And when they met our grandson and found out his connection to Kalipoki, they were able to work with him and got the family active. But almost any airport in the world you can go and run into. So their influence is all over the world now.
Elder Groberg and Jean as well, what if you could say one thing? I imagine that we probably have, because you talked about their faith. They're remarkable. The Polynesian people, their enthusiasm for the gospel is so inspiring to me. I'm sure that we have a lot of people that are Polynesian that listen to this podcast. If you could say one thing to them, specifically maybe saints in the Pacific Islands now, what would you want them to know?
Well, I would say honor your heritage. Don't forget that who you are and who you represent as people of great faith. The world is totally there now. They all have cell phones and access to everything good or evil that's out there in the internet world and so forth, and just be true to who they are and to the Lord, and to build upon the heritage. We're living in this modern world, and yet don't lose the goodness of what you are a part of as a member of your culture, and use what we have in today's world to spread the gospel and to be faithful and true.
It's beautiful. Thank you.
I think I would just echo that. Just be faithful, and faithful to your covenants, with the temple in Tonga and in all the islands now, or most of them. That's so important. And one thing that we haven't mentioned that is kind of a characteristic of Polynesian people is their singing and their dancing and their artistic expressions that way. Sometimes it gets a little bit exuberant and so forth, but I think that's part of the heritage of every once in a while when I read through the Book of Mormon, it talks about things that all of a sudden, oh yeah, well that was like a Tongi Lau Lau, or that's like when they were all worked up about something or another. And I think just maintain that enthusiasm for life, but mostly your enthusiasm for being faithful and for singing praises to the Lord and keeping your covenants. And if you'll do that, you'll not only succeed in life, but you'll be the light that the Lord intended you to be to help others.
Yeah. I had the chance this year to go for the first time ever to the Polynesian Cultural Center. And this is a non-sponsored plug for the PCC. It's amazing. I had no idea what that was like, but what an experience. And you mentioned, Elder Groberg, the chance to draw people to the gospel, to Jesus Christ through the light that is so evident. I think that was the thing that amazed me there. Is it's like Disneyland, you're like being cow herded through this place, and there's so many people there, and they're drawn to it because of that light. There are no rides, but it's all about their culture, the Polynesian culture. I imagine that, speaking of drawing people to the gospel, I imagine that there were a lot of people that have seen these movies, specifically the first one, that have been drawn to the gospel because of your story. Have you heard any stories from people about that?
Thousands of them, yeah. It's just constant. And as you mentioned, it's been 18 years, and there's still people being influenced. But yes, many. I wouldn't want to, I couldn't get into specifics, but I would say one of the things that has really made me feel good and made me recognize that doing what President Monson wanted us to do has its own reward. Whenever you're obedient to the prophets, the Lord uses that to make good things happen. And the number of people that have served missions that have told me, I really wasn't planning on going until I saw that movie. Or I remember one young man in Northern California. He said, I was not active in the church. He'd been baptized, but in fact, he drifted way away from the church. And he said, he was not living the commandments and was maybe on some things he shouldn't have been on. But he said, I just ended up just went to a movie and didn't even know what it was, and it ended up being The Other Side of Heaven. He said, I just sat there on the back row, just by myself in the dark. And he said, all of a sudden, he says, all of a sudden I was watching a movie, but I was watching something else. I just saw myself, and I just kind of came out and went right straight to my bishop and said, what do I have to do to straighten my life out and get ready to go on a mission? And, and of course, a lot of people joined the church. We had a letter from a lady in Texas really not this long ago that said that she had just gone. It's been a few years because I think she said there was
back in the days of
when there was a Blockbuster video store. She just went to get a video, and someone said, I want a family video, and said, try this one. And so she did, and her and her family just loved it. And just a few days later, just through the neighborhood, she saw a couple of young men on bikes and said, hey, you look familiar. Come on. And anyway, it ended up that she would join the church. But yeah, there are literally thousands and thousands of stories like that.
Remarkable. Well, you both are just such a joy, and it has been such a treat to have you. Before we wrap up, my last question for you both is, what does it mean to you to be all in the gospel of Jesus Christ?
Well, I am grateful to have been born to faithful, hardworking, loyal, good parents who taught me from the beginning that this was the way of life that would be happy and right and good. And I really know no other way except through watching friends and some other family members that have tried other paths. And I'm just so grateful for that beginning and grateful for the testimony that's grown through the years, strengthening that desire to build my life on the foundation of the Savior. We have at home a little, what we call Grandma and Grandpa's rock garden. We had a time with the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren as they've come along, where we sing the song, "The Wise Man Built His House Upon the Rock," talk about it is the rock of the Savior, Jesus Christ, that our lives will be happy if we'll build on that foundation. And then they each put their name on a little rock and put it in our little basket of rocks.
So cute. I love that.
But that is the only way to happiness. And I'm just grateful to have that, to have been born in the covenant and to have a wonderful priesthood holder as a companion throughout eternity, and special, lovely children, and grandchildren, and pray that they will always build their lives upon the rock of our Savior, Jesus Christ.
Thank you, Jean.
Well, I think I echo what Jean said. I think if I were to say one word, it would be obedience. Just be obedient. Obedience brings forth the blessings of heaven. It just simply does. That, and to be all in means no strings attached. You're with all your might, mind, and strength, and just do it. Just keep your covenants and don't quit. One of the things that I've kind of noticed about a lot of the younger generation now, it seems like quitting is an option, I'm just not going to do that because we live in a world that is there's so many options. Oh, I don't like that. I'm going to do this. Well, there really aren't a lot of options about the gospel. You either live it or you don't, and you don't quit. I think trust in God, trust in his servants, follow the leaders, just believe and just do it. I don't know quite how to express it any better than that I just know from personal experience that, yes, there are lots of challenges, but as Alma told his son Helaman, the Lord will be with you through your troubles, through your trials, through your afflictions. He'll be there. And so we're all going to have troubles, trials, and afflictions. The question is, do we want to have someone to help us through them or not? Or do we want to just do it on our own? I can testify that it's a lot better to have the Savior on your side, and he will get you through. I've been nearly drowned. I've been nearly starved. I've been just all kinds of things. But the Lord's brought me through them, and he will. He will everyone. And so that's my testimony, is that he is there and he is able to help us, not only able, but wanting to help us and will help us. And so just dig in and go. Don't have quitting or not. I don't like that. Don't have that as an option, because that will lead you to unhappiness. And happiness is having faith in the Savior and following him.
Thank you both so much. Elder Groberg, thank you. Jean, thank you so much. And it has been such a pleasure to have you. We are so grateful to John and Jean Groberg for being with us on today's episode. You can watch their story in the 2 major motion pictures, Other Side of Heaven 1 and 2, which are both available on DVD at Deseret Book now.